Today we're reading over Nehemiah 11 to 13, and we're actually finishing the book of Nehemiah, which is exciting. Actually, we have the book of Malachi tomorrow, Malachi 1 to 4, and then the next day we are into the New Testament. So if you've been with us from the beginning, we are very close to rounding out the entire Old Testament.
Super exciting. I actually can't believe that. It seems like it's been a long time coming, but here we are. So anyway, finished out Nehemiah today, and quite honestly, I feel like, I don't know, it feels like there's a lot of names.
There is quite a few names, and actually,
names.
Jenny hates reading names, and she got stuck doing it today. So Jenny gets a huge gold star for reading all the names.
Yay.
She always takes a lot more care to try to read them correctly than I do. So maybe that'll be obvious in the reading.
Yeah, definitely obvious. Anyway, so chapter 12 is what I was reading for today, and something that stuck out to me is the fact that they are taking the time to dedicate the wall that they had built. So like they are literally, if you ever have a chance to look at a map of what the wall would have been surrounding the temple and all of their space, it's actually like quite significant. So they're sending people all around to the different sections of the wall, to the different gates. I'm assuming to just kind of like dedicate it. What it seems like there are women and children. Like I think it's always interesting when they add that the women and children were also rejoicing, because it's like it's not just this like singled out like super high up leaders. This is like literally everyone is involved in this. This is a very like community driven thing. But this is like no little thing. Like they are marching around the entire area to make sure that it is dedicated to the Lord and his will, which is kind of interesting. It's like a big deal.
It is a big deal because many of their religious gatherings were for only men as heads of the household, the spiritual fathers. But for the very, very significant gatherings, they would gather the entire congregation of men, of women, and of children. So whenever you do see women and children present in these gatherings, it's meant to be like a capstone hallmark kind of gathering that's going to impact the congregation in a big way.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. Something else that it caught my attention anyway was after we read about this and they're like kind of like, I don't know, putting the stake in the ground saying this is the new beginning, we're starting over. You had read in chapter 13 kind of it sounded a little bit of like Nehemiah being like, hey, knock it off.
Yeah, so this is interesting. So Nehemiah 13, the heading
like
is actually
towards the Israelites.
The heading is actually Nehemiah's final reforms. So if you remember at the beginning of the book, Nehemiah is the cupbearer of Artaxerxes I, and he goes before Artaxerxes I and is saddened. And Artaxerxes is like, "Hey, what do you want?" And he says, "Hey, I need to go to Jerusalem." Mm-hmm. And the king says, "Give me the time, and I will let you go." So basically, he needed to know like how long you're going to be gone, when are you going to come back, and I'll let you go. So Nehemiah does fulfill whatever that period of time is, and he returns to Susa, to the king in Babylon, Persia. Then he gets permission to come back again. So we're not quite sure how long Nehemiah was gone, but he was gone. And then he returns, and when he returns, he finds out that they're not honoring the Sabbath again. Not everybody, but there is significant problems with people honoring the Sabbath. There is significant problems with people marrying foreign women. We've talked about before how it's not about what nationality the women are. It's about who their gods are
serving, yeah.
And how it takes their hearts away from the God of the universe and like towards idols. And actually, this jumped out to me. This is chapter 13, verse 26. Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin on account of such women? Among these nations there was no king like him, and he was beloved by his God. And God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, foreign women made even him to sin. I've read this before, but it's never stuck out to me like it does today. I wasn't aware that there is a moment where Solomon is pointed out as like, hey, he wasn't actually that great. Like his heart was taken away from God because of all these foreign women, and I don't want the same thing to happen to you. So I think the important thing just to clarify and call out is that when when people of different heritage and nations are being called out, again, it's not about where they came from or like what their blood is or who their relatives are. It's about who they worship and where their hearts are. So when they are pushing people outside of the assembly, the assumption can be made that these are people who do not have their hearts aligned with God. And that becomes clear later in the chapter, because just a couple verses later in chapter 13, Nehemiah is saying, like, you are not following the Lord, and you're not following the Lord just like Solomon wasn't following the Lord, because his heart is being pulled in too many different directions toward idols and false gods. So it can make you uncomfortable. It can catch you off guard. But really, this is a group of people who are not fully faithful to God, and that is evident in chapter 13 because they're not taking the Sabbath seriously. They're chasing after foreign women because they love other gods, and it's messing up the quality and the authenticity of the worship of the people. So we've talked many times on the podcast about how discipline is an important thing, and God disciplines those he loves. So when they're being pushed out of the assembly, it's to discipline them for not being close to God, not worshiping God. And actually, like if you're worried about the nationalistic part of things, if it seems to you like God is being unfair, don't forget that Ruth, a very prominent person in the line of Jesus, is a Moabite. So certainly God's plan involved Moabites.
It's almost just like, it's like keeping the temptation from even being a possibility.
Exactly.
Which is helpful to think about.
It's one of the reasons that like careful reading of the word and studying the word is really important, because you could read over that and be like, wow, God's super racist, but that's not what's going on at all. It's Nehemiah being concerned for the authenticity of people's worship, because they do not want to be on this hamster wheel of disobedience.
Oh my, no, they don't.
So we have officially finished up Nehemiah. We're done with the book. It's relatively shorter than some of the other ones we've read, but at the center of it is a restoration of God's people. Nehemiah is a fantastic leader. He's very concerned about the heart of his people. He's very concerned about his own personal character, how he leads his people. We can see Ezra lifting up the word of God and how important the word of God is to the people. And so it sort of feels to me like we've come through this dark period of exile, and there'll be dark periods to come, but this is a bright spot in what we've been reading, this bright spot of Nehemiah being sent by God to set things straight and make things right. And so be encouraged by that. As far as your part goes, this feels like a basic Sunday school answer, but continue to love the Lord with everything that's in you, and continue to reorient yourself closer and closer to God, because it's obvious that people tend to be drawn away from God, not towards him. You don't drift toward God, you drift away from him. So I just invite you to battle the drift in your life, to draw near to the Lord and make sure that your worship is authentic and in the right places. We'll be back again tomorrow with Malachi, and that will be our final episode in the Old Testament. So if you've been hanging on, waiting for some Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John's, we'll be there very soon. We'll see you then. Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplanyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.